Hello, hello. What a wonderful crowd you are. You just silenced the minute the microphone went on. Thank you. I am Margaret Lowe. I am WBUR's CEO, and I am delighted to welcome you to CitySpace on this wet, chilly December evening, right in the middle of the busy holidays. Thank you for making it out. It's wonderful to see such a packed house. I hope everybody saw their beautiful WBUR Atlantic swag bags on your chairs. It is the perfect pairing in my mind and our little gift to you, and thank you for being here. So we know that the Thanksgiving table is cleared, the leftovers are mostly gone, and we are hurtling towards 2026. But tonight we have a moment to pause together to consider some of the most consequential issues of our time. The spark for this evening was the Atlantic's November cover story, The Unfinished Revolution, examining the founding of this country and how history informs its present and its future. The Atlantic's team is going to spend much of 2026 touching down in cities and towns across America to foster conversations like the one we're going to have here tonight. In the end, they plan to visit all 50 states. It's a hugely... Yeah, right? Exactly. It is a hugely ambitious undertaking, and it actually fits with the Atlantic's usual style and swagger. It makes me so happy that my Atlantic colleagues wanted to start here in Boston with WBUR and with all of you, because Boston holds a very special place in the Atlantic's history. The magazine was founded here nearly 170 years ago in 1857. Yes, they are old. In my mind, and I suspect in many of yours, it is the most important magazine published in America today. As a long-time Atlantic editor once wrote, we help thinking people think harder. And I like to think that WBUR does the very same thing. And the Atlantic has a very special place in my heart, too. I spent 5 of the best professional years of my life at the Atlantic, working alongside the Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, and his brilliant band of reporters and editors. And that was before I got lured back to Boston, to my hometown, to run WBUR. So I will welcome Jeffrey and Meghna Chakrabarti to the stage in just a moment. First, I am delighted to introduce the Atlantic's Peter Latman. I also had the pleasure of working with Peter when I was at the Atlantic. Peter spent many years as a journalist at both the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. He is now managing director of media at Emerson Collective, which means his job is to oversee the Emerson's media and journalism investments and grants, and lucky for him and lucky for us, that includes the Atlantic, where he is vice chair and on the board of directors. And with that, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Peter Latman to say a few words.
Great. Thank you so much, Margaret. It's such a thrill to be introduced by a great friend and former colleague. As Margaret noted, she helped build the live events business at the Atlantic and launched the Atlantic Festival. So we're really thrilled to bring the band back together tonight with you and WBUR. On behalf of my Atlantic colleagues, thanks to all of you for filling this great space tonight, especially with the cruddy weather. Earlier today, as Margaret noted, the Atlantic announced a new series of events called the Atlantic Across America, which over the next 3 years will take us to all 50 states. And tonight is our very first stop. Our goal is to bring journalists to communities across the country to talk about the ideas and the issues that we cover. Each event will be distinct, and many of them will be in partnerships with local newsrooms doing outstanding work like this one. And while Emerson Collective, where I work, is proud of its association with big fancy magazines like The Atlantic, we are also big supporters of newsrooms in cities and states across the country, because we believe that a healthy democracy depends on local journalism. So after Boston, we will head to Phoenix, Santa Fe, Miami, and New Orleans. So tell all your friends in those cities to keep an eye out. But we wanted to start where it all began for the Atlantic, right here in Beantown. Recently, our staff historian and archivist, Jake Lundberg, who, without question, has the coolest job at the Atlantic, he dug into our very first issue from November 1857, and he called his essay, Doom Scrolling in the 1850s. And the parallels are striking. He wrote that the Atlantic Monthly emerged in a moment of information overload when American life felt unmoored. And in that first issue, an Atlantic founder from nearby Concord named Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "In this kingdom of illusions, we grope eagerly for stays and foundations." That's what the Atlantic has always tried to offer, stays and foundations amid times of uncertainty. And that mission feels as relevant today as it did 168 years ago. So thank you again for joining us. And with that, I'll bring back Margaret Lowe.
Thank you, Peter. Stays and foundations. I like that. Let's keep it up. And now a quick introduction to two people who hardly need any introduction at all. In his 9 years as editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg has lifted a storied magazine to great new heights. A few years ago, Jeffrey wrote a note to readers, and he said, "You know, we try very hard to be interesting. This is a prerequisite." I love that. Basically, what he's saying is, don't be boring. And Jeffrey, my friend, you, nor your magazine, are never, ever boring. Everybody here likely remembers that Jeffrey became a household name last March after he was added to a Signal group chat with more than half a dozen high-ranking Trump administration officials discussing plans for U.S. strikes in Yemen. During his tenure at The Atlantic as both a reporter and now as editor, Jeffrey has written countless blockbuster stories and interviewed everyone from Barack Obama to Benjamin Netanyahu and Fidel Castro before he died. A little later in this hour, Jeffrey will talk to Massachusetts Congressman Jake Auchincloss about our current political climate and the future of democracy. But first, a conversation with our very own Meghna Chakrabarti, the peerless host and editor of On Point. They'll talk about America at 250. Meghna, Jeff, the floor is yours.
Hello, hello. Before we actually officially get started, I want to say that you definitely have some of the smartest people working for you, because I noticed the next stops on the Atlantic Across America tour were all in the South, right? Or the Southwest, which I presume is
I said no Chicago until April, right?
Winter month strategy, exactly. I will get the fangirling out of the way here quite quickly, but The Atlantic is the one magazine that every issue when it comes out, I blurt out amongst my staff at On Point, inevitably there's an article in there where I think, God, I wish we had thought of that. So that's the highest praise.
Well, we love On Point.
Well, we want to steal your ideas.
It's the third highest rated NPR show. Did you know that? Fourth? Fifth?
I think we'll have to fact check that.
I'm making that up.
Amongst friends, yes, it may be the third highest.
It's the least favorite NPR show in the Trump administration.
I don't even think we deserve that accolade just yet. That's what we should fight for, though.
Let's just say it. The line between reality and fiction is very, very porous now.
Yeah, exactly. It is whatever we want it to be. How's that? So the first question I actually have to ask you, but before we get to talking about this latest issue of the magazine, is here we are celebrating the upcoming 250th birthday of the United States. Given what you know about U.S. history and our present, do you think that the Atlantic will be celebrating a 500th birthday of America? Will there be a nation here to celebrate?
Yes, it will be projected right through your eyeball. I don't know what the delivery system is going to be. 500 that's a long time. I'm aiming for 2028
251.
approximately. I'm aiming for 28, 29 right now. See what happens. I don't see why not, except that and we were talking about this a little bit before. There were 1,000 magazines that have come and gone since the Atlantic was founded, and people sometimes ask why did the Atlantic survive, and I think I'd like to think that there's some divine reason for it. I think it's been a lot of luck in a kind of way. Owners who were too stubborn to let it die. I mean, the average magazine lasted, in through the 19th century and part of the 20th century, 4 years. I mean, these things come and they go. And by the way, we see that in our own lifetimes. I mean, we both pay attention obsessively to the media, and when we were growing up, Time and Newsweek were the behemoths, and now they're ghost ships. I mean, the brand exists, but it's only the brand name, as far as I'm concerned. I don't mean to insult anybody, but things change, and the media environment. And I have to compliment Margaret on making BUR a huge powerhouse in this community, and nationally. Media environment is a very strange situation we're living in, and things that you think are solid as rocks just kind of disappear into the air if you're not careful. And so, I can't say what's going to happen in 250 years or 20 years or 5 years. I think as long as you have our North Star, and I'm being very, very sincere when our North Star, you have to have, going back to what Margaret said, first of all, your stories have to be interesting. You have to have the highest quality possible stories, and you have to make as many of them as you can without diminishing quality. And stories, in the whole realm, not just stories about politics, and not just short stories, and not just long stories, but your journalism product. All you can do is make one thing: excellent stories, and then you have to convince a public that has been trained out of paying for journalism over the last 25 years. That was not so clever. In retrospect, you have to train them to pay again, treat it like any commodity that you buy, from electricity to food to cars. And we are, knock on wood, we are succeeding at this, but it's a very tenuous business.
Yeah. So what about
Don't just make up questions now. You don't have to need that. Yeah.
What about the nation itself? Will there be a nation to celebrate in 250 years?
It's funny, when the Atlantic was founded in 1857, they were asking themselves, will we have a nation in 3 years, 4 years? And they didn't, right? I mean, they had a union, but then they had a breakaway. We're not going to have that, I don't think. It's not geographically possible. So I always say, I think this is true, I always say that, the thing we don't know about this moment is whether it's a midlife crisis on the part of a country, if it's a nervous breakdown, or if it's a terminal disease, right? You hear that? No, that's the problem. I desperately don't want it to be terminal. I could see all kinds of reasons why dialectical forces will come and make it not terminal, right? Somewhere between nervous breakdown and midlife crisis is where I am. On this question, and those are things that people recover from, and countries can recover from them too. But I don't want to. I can't predict, except to say this: it's like this is why this 250th is so much more interesting than the 200th. Even though the 200th, I remember the 200th. I was a kid, a small kid, but I remember the boats, and it was also, even though it was right after Watergate, it just, in reading about it, it sounded simpler. Like the most questions were settled. In a way, and now what makes this so interesting is that so many questions are unsettled, and how we answer them in the coming years will predict whether we actually make it. But what I do know, of course, is that empires rise and empires fall. Nothing human-made lasts forever. So, to me, it's an open question, and it's all about active citizenship at a certain point. Journalism, free journalism, being a component of active citizenship.
I've always thought that the United States, indeed, in the cycle of empires, what makes it extraordinary is that it's going through that cycle at much faster pace than
Everything is.
previous empires, which took hundreds, if not thousands, of years to achieve the state
Right.
of.
Well, it took 2 months just to get a papyrus to one capital to another to start a war.
Yeah.
You know, now you can start a war because through a middle of the night tweet. Not that I have anybody in mind who might do such a thing.
We'll get to that
Yeah.
person in a second. But I like your analogy about if this is not a terminal disease, then it still requires some kind of remedy, right? And in this, the remedy in Washington would ostensibly be other institutions or other branches. But you have said that that Congress, the Republican-led Congress, has basically abdicated its duties as a co-equal branch of government, a la Watergate and Nixon.
Yeah, well, Watergate ended because the Republicans went up to the president and said, this isn't working anywhere. By the way, I mean, every day we have something that's greater than Watergate.
Yes.
I mean, every day is a bigger Watergate than Watergate. But at that time, it was a terrible crisis. I remember it was, it's interesting to think about the Saturday Night Massacre, where an attorney general fires, a special prosecutor, and the deputy attorney general quits. And we know the story. What's so interesting about it is that there was still, it wasn't as if the Justice Department had been completely invasion of the body snatchers kind of taken over by, like, there were still people with spine and courage to stand up, and they had to be removed. And that of course precipitated a set of events that led, Republicans to go down to the White House and say, that's it, that's enough, it's not working. But that's what we don't have right now. And I say this as a citizen, not as a journalist, but I say having a very strong, independent-minded, conservative Republican Party driven by ideas and ideals is a prerequisite for having a democracy. We need a liberal one that's just as strong and just as aggressive and filling the town square with ideas that you might find obnoxious, but they're ideas. What we have right now is we don't have a Republican Party that's putting forth ideas into the discourse. They're just doing whatever the leader says, which is not a very American approach to governance.
You don't think they're putting forth ideas? I mean, I look at Russell Vogt, and I think he is an idea factory.
I should be careful. What I think of as traditional conservative ideas on social, military. You're right. You're right. They are ideas. I shouldn't derogate them by saying that they're. What I mean is that the generator, the ideas don't get released into the wild unless one man who sits atop this social media pyramid allows them to go out, and that doesn't seem very healthy. Yeah. But we could probably find a way to have an argument over whether or not, the Republican Party is a repository of conservative ideas or not, rather than personality-driven ideas. I mean, there's also something that we also have to take into account, which is, we always say that, the real bias in journalism is toward coherence, meaning that journalists think that their job is to make everything make sense for you and make it make sense in a 4-minute segment or a 7-minute radio segment or a 1,000-word story. The world is not coherent. And right now it's especially incoherent. So it's very, very hard to discern all this.
But I wonder if we're seeing signs of life of a non-exclusively Trumpist Republican Party, because when I was just upstairs earlier this evening, both CNN and Fox were running stories about the latest in boat bombing gate. But what they were talking,
You're gonna have to work on that.
I know
one.
that's I would never make it as a Washington wordsmith, that's for sure. But what they were talking about were increasing questions coming from Republican members of Congress about whether about the legality of the strikes and whether President Trump is going to drag the United States into a war with Venezuela. I mean, so that is actually more forthright opposition to the president than we've seen in a long time, if ever.
Remember, the rules of lame duckness apply universally. Remember that he's approaching 80. remember a lot. And there's a lot to remember here. Now, obviously, there's a big asterisk on we're approaching lame duck status that requires the cooperation of the person who's lame ducked out of power. And we saw, obviously, in January 6th, as the culmination of a moment when the person didn't readily agree that it was time to go. But yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of talk in the Democratic circles about embracing economic populism in a way that is much more muscular than people are used to, because most people find that prices are unsustainable. Things just cost too much. The average car price is now $50,000. You say that to average American, and it's like, how can we be expected to do this? So there are a lot of factors that are kind of coalescing, including, by the way, I mean, Trump is a remarkable political figure. He's the most important American political figure of the 21st century, the most consequential. He has had incredible dynamism, incredible popularity with his base. But if you watch lately, and I'm not trying to overcorrect for, general laggardness and noticing that Biden was, going in one direction and it wasn't up. Trump is aging, and he doesn't go to rallies, and he doesn't do rallies anymore, and he's not keeping the base activated and often angry, and the base needs food too, and gasoline, and they need to buy cars, and they need to do all the things. Eventually, reality intrudes, I think, is the notion, right? Is that Democrats are saying, well, eventually people are going to feel this when they go to McDonald's to take their family of 5 to McDonald's, and it costs $35 or $40 to feed them at McDonald's. Like, the person in power suffers.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen, though. He has the thing that Donald Trump has is luck. He's always had luck. So never count Donald Trump out.
Yeah. By the way, if you have questions for Jeff, we take them over a site called slido.com, SLIDO.com. You can use your phone to get there. And then if you enter the word Atlantic, that's our little page, and just type in your questions there, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. Speaking of phones, part of me.
That was good. That was nice. Yeah.
I actually didn't even plan that one. That was good. Do you have phone-based intel, or have you been accidentally drawn into any secure app conversations about how the Pentagon and White House are their next steps in responding to the legitimate uproar over the bombing of boats in international waters?
A, would I tell you, and B, what are the chances?
What
are the chances of that happening twice?
Pretty good, I'd say.
I mean, that would be like the whole thing was so utterly stupid and improbable the first time around, and I. You'll ask me your questions, and I'll give you a serious response to the question. But no, I have not been. and I don't. And people don't believe me when I say this, but I don't want to be for reasons that are very serious. But go on with your questions, and I can explain that.
Well, aside from wishing that your phone one day ends up in the Smithsonian,
this is not. The.
That's not the phone.
No, the real phone is actually. In a
lockbox somewhere?
Undisclosed location.
In a freezer.
No, yeah. No, it is. Yeah. I mean, my technological life got really upended quite a bit in that period. Yeah, no, this is not the phone. I just want everybody to know that in case they're thinking of mugging me later. All you got is a phone. You didn't get any,
Oh, but given your deep experience in Washington, I wonder if you could help us understand essentially the almost psychodrama level of response that's been coming and being retracted from Trump and Hegseth over the past few days about this issue. I mean, the latest is that Hegseth is sticking to his line. I should say the secretary is sticking to his line that he didn't see the survivors on the video.
And that may be true. I mean, the New York Times is reporting now that they have 5 sources who say that Hegseth made a general order, but not the specific order. It wasn't in the room, I think. You have to read the latest iterations of the story. So right now what's going on is there seems to be a little bit of a fight going on between the New York Times and the Washington Post about what actually was said and what the timing was. I mean, which is interesting, but it also obscures the larger question of what precisely are we doing and who are the people on these boats? And what is the legal predicate for taking action against them? And is it warfare? Are we at war with drug dealers, or do we have a criminal drug problem that is dealt in different ways than all-out military action? And where is this leading with Venezuela? And is it a predicate to finding an excuse to invade Venezuela? And why would we? You get the point. We can go down the rabbit hole, and we should. And reporters should obviously go figure out minute to minute what happened with this particular boat. But my question as a reporter is like the most basic one of all, and I have to say that I have special skepticism when it comes to this administration. One should be appropriately skeptical of all powerful people and presidents, but this Pentagon, unlike other Pentagons, isn't trying to provide information to the public through the media. These are the people who are on the boat. The boat came from here.
Right.
We believe, based on forensics, we believe based on this kind of intelligence, that kind of intelligence, that it was carrying X amount of drugs, this kind of drug. It was heading here. This is part of this cartel. This is incredibly disturbing, because sometimes our government performs transparency. Sometimes it actually gives us transparency, but there's always an understanding. There has always been an understanding that we have to some degree, explain our actions. Now, Congress maybe is awakening to its responsibility here, and that's interesting. And by the way, I'm not making a judgment. I just want to know what is the rationale for killing now maybe 100 people? Mm-hmm. And maybe they're all little junior Escobars, and the world is a better place without them, and they were bringing in drugs that were going to kill American citizens, and it's all terrible. Or maybe they aren't. Like, I just have no. I think we're in a new situation, a new information environment, when they're actively not sharing any details of this sort of thing. At the end of the day, one hopes that it'll come out, and that Congress will perform its duty, and that the journalists, it's all the journalists, by the way, who've been kicked out of the Pentagon, who are doing all this good reporting.
Right.
You don't have to be in the building to have sources.
Yes. Speaking of things that don't make sense, meanwhile, the president pardons a former head of state who we know actually helped bring masses of narcotics into the country.
And people who now currently work for the Trump administration were prosecuting that person. I mean, no, it's not just like, it wasn't a Democratic prosecution. It was just a real prosecution. I know, it's just, like I said, there is we are living. Sometimes I think that we're living for the last 10 years or so in Donald Trump's head, but we're also living like in a world that he created, like a matrix. But sometimes I think that we're living partially in Steve Bannon's head, in the sense that his correct theory was that if you, quote, flood the zone with shit, you will make it very, very hard for people to understand not only what's real and what's not real, but what's important and what's not important.
Yeah. So going back to the nation's founding, actually, tell me if you think this analogy is terrible or not. I'm using him as my on-the-fly editor. It's a real privilege to have him.
No, this is good.
Doing editing. So
I bet I enjoy it.
You know, the nonsensical behaviors of the president, in a certain sense, is exactly the kind of things that colonists, which in what was not yet the United States, were trying to get away from regarding the King of England, who was mad. But the difference, I would say, is that the British Parliament at the time was highly functional, and was actually the body that was passing many of the laws that the colonists objected to, et cetera. So even that doesn't feel like a good analogy for understanding this moment.
There's no precedent for this moment. What is interesting to me is that, and by the way, these are not partisan observations, because I don't think that Donald Trump is behaving like a Republican has traditionally behaved. And January 6th was the acid test of this. For 250 years, and we spent a lot of time in this issue, which I hope you will read, talking about George Washington and I think that George Washington, I mean, he had many gifts to the nation, right? But his signal gift was that when people came to him afterwards and said, "You can be president for life. We're going to give you a bigger title, a better title." John Adams one, they had all kinds. He was like, "President is fine, and I'd just like to go home now, please. I'll become your first president. We'll do the job, and then I'm going to go home." Cincinnati style. And he set the path, and it was his character more than anything else. The people wanted him to stay president until he died. He's like, "I'm not doing this." And we've had president after president after president has understood that eventually you have to go home. FDR might have been, on the bubble on that question. But you went home, especially when the voters said, "Go home."
Right.
And so we are in completely. I always try to think about, Peter Baker and I from the New York Times always have this joke about like how many times can you use the word unprecedented in journalism. But this is a completely novel experience. This is why we're all suffering a kind of vertigo every day. It's like, wait, you can do that? He did that? Why did he do that? We've never had a person in that job who doesn't understand that George Washington is the model. Like you are a failure as president if you don't understand that what George Washington did is the central responsibility of any president, which is to stop being president when it's time to go.
Yeah.
And that, again, not partisan. I mean, there could have been a Democrat who does this. By the way, I want to say, and it goes back to Signalgate, I just have to say this because it bothers me, and what happens is the MAGA press or the pro-Trump press, especially because of Signalgate and a story that I did 5 years ago about suckers and losers, right. Yep. Trump calling, they say the left-wing Atlantic and we're part of the what, and the story is that, so Trump would regularly call me, his term was sleazebag, radical left lunatic, editor of the Atlantic, and like after he did this like 6 months ago or something, one of my kids called me and said, "I saw what Trump said," and she said, "I mean, but he's wrong. You're not left." And it's like, thank you for noticing. No, it was like, yeah, well, the other stuff is up for grabs, but I don't know why you says that. You're not left. And like, I feel like all of us are being put in this position where if you're opposing manifestations of monarchical behavior or despotic behavior, you're labeled as a liberal or as a left-winger, or as they'll call you communist, socialist, whatever. And it's like, no, this is. I don't mean to like. This is not like a climb every mountain, let's all stand and salute the flag moment for me. But it's sort of like, no, that's patriotic.
That's
just being a patriotic American is resisting despotic behavior wherever it comes from. That's why this is a great country, and it's a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why, coming back to the 250 idea, 250 is worth celebrating because this is a great idea.
It is. And I have only 2 minutes with you, Jeffrey. So about the latest issue, it's organized into 5 chapters about defiance, conflict, independence, memory, and crisis. These seem to be as woven into the DNA of the American experiment as the concept of democracy itself. Right.
It's the crisis is interesting because we wouldn't. It's a great issue, and we have amazing historians who are writing. There's some pieces that are just great as pure reading experiences. Rick Atkinson on just how crazy King George was or wasn't is a fantastic piece. But the energy behind this was, well, again, the questions that we thought were settled don't seem to be that settled. So let's use this moment to say, does this American experiment, going back to your original question, does it go on forever? And crisis is interesting, right? I always find that all those categories are interesting. Defiance is interesting because I think that we have collective amnesia. It's part an educational problem. It's part becoming accustomed to the way things are, but we don't remember why We don't remember why we didn't like a monarch, right? And that's a problem. But crisis is interesting because I can't, and you do this, every day with your own journalism. It's like, how bad a crisis is this? How unfixable is it? How fixable? There's a good chance that we would be sitting up here in 4 years and going, what was that about? Like I don't know, like Wes Moore could be president and we were arguing about, marginal tax rates or something like that. Back to the normal course of events. I don't think we're getting there quite so cleanly. But I think like the success of America has led us into this kind of crisis. Again, hard to define how much of a crisis it is. And also, we're all part of a big new experiment. It's never been done successfully before, but we're the first large-scale multicultural democracy to try to stay alive and thrive. And that's different than what it was 100 years ago, obviously. And that's why you have this argument J.D. Vance is having about what is the nature of Americanness. And so all those topics are sort of it's also tremendously interesting. If it weren't so fraught for all of us, it would be even more interesting academically, but we're living this.
Well, it's been a real pleasure and honor to sit here with you,
thank
Jeff.
you.
Thank you
I
so very
appreciate
much.
I appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to your conversation with the congressman.
Oh, no, thanks for doing this. Thank you. And now I switch. There was choreography involved in this. Thanks. Her show's great. I assume all of you listened to it, or you wouldn't be here. Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate you. So how great do you think we are, the two of us? What do you think? Let me start. How great is WBUR?
I think my district.
Are we physically in your district right now?
We are not, but I would hazard a guess that my district has the densest concentration of WBUR listeners.
And Atlantic subscribers.
I am sure that is true. Yeah, there's a reason I'm here, Jeff.
Yeah. I have a feeling that Atlantic subscribers are overrepresented in your district. Let's keep the conversation going a little bit on this 250 theme, and I would love to get your definition. And one of the reasons it's so interesting to talk to you is you will maybe argue with the specific definitions, but I think of you as a centrist, very much a centrist Democrat, very much not on a certain side of the Democratic Party, which puts you closer to the center, the middle of the country in terms of your attitudes and policies. How do you define patriotism as we come up on the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country?
250 years ago, the founders launched this American experiment, see if a free people could govern themselves as equals under the law. And it's always been contested. As you said in your conversation before, the questions are not as settled as we thought. And the current instance of the question has been defined, I think, by J.D. Vance. In his speech last year to the Republican convention, he described his family's cemetery plot in eastern Kentucky. And then he declared, people will not fight for an idea, but they will fight for their homeland. And this is the MAGA campaign. This is it. This is the crystallization of it. Because what they are saying is that we are the real Americans. Our blood is in this soil and we will defend it. And you Democrats, you're rootless. And because you're rootless, you don't stand for anything. And this is the challenge of the moment that must be met, because the vice president is wrong. His blood and soil populism is wrong. From Bunker Hill to Shiloh to Normandy to Selma, Americans do fight for ideas. We do.
To put your own biography in this, because you actually joined the Marines to fight. Why did you join?
I joined because, in part, I felt like I owed the Marine Corps my own story. The Marine Corps had sent my grandfather to school to study engineering. He was a poor Jewish kid at a time when Jewish people throughout the world were being exterminated, and the United States government gave him an opportunity that he then seized, and to the end of his days, the most proud he ever was, and this was a man who invented the first prosthetic limb, was of being a United States Marine and being an American. And I was coming from a different place, but I felt like I owed this country that had given so much to my family something back. And the Marine Corps was a challenge that I wanted to accept. And it was service for an idea. And that's what I think the vice president so wholly misunderstands, but what is also the opportunity for my party is to seize back that constitutional patriotism and say, Mr. Vice President, we have fought for ideas before, and if you think we won't fight for them again, you are wrong. We will.
Right. I don't understand. He's not here on the stage, so I can't ask him. But it does seem like a large number of Americans in World War II, especially, were motivated by it wasn't that they felt a blood relationship with Pearl Harbor. They felt that a basic American idea was under a worldwide threat. That's why I find it hard to understand his analysis that there's nothing but blood and soil. How common is that? I mean, you're in Congress with a large number of Republicans. What percentage of the Republican Party do you think actually holds that blood and soil idea, as opposed to more traditional ideas about what constitutional patriotism looks like?
It's not a binary. Obviously, there's a scale here. But I think that what we are going to see in the 2028 primary, when the dear leader departs, that
Wait, can I ask you a serious question?
Yeah.
When or if?
Fair question. I do think that there's going to be a competitive MAGA primary in 28. Let me just put that on the table. Do I feel as confident as I would like to feel about that? No, but I do think there will be. And I think, as is common in these kinds of maximalist movements, is that the heirs have to prove their bona fides by being as maximalist as possible, by being as pure as possible. You're seeing this with J.D. Vance's embrace of Nick Fuentes, who is, unabashed and unapologetic in his pure blood and soil nationalism. And I expect that is going to be the shibboleth for the MAGA movement, that is going to be their campaign in 2028. And it's incumbent upon Democrats then to not cede faith, family, and the flag to that notion, but instead to say, we are the patriots.
I want to come to constitutional patriotism in a minute, but stay on the Fuentes trend in the Republican Party. Do you actually think that the Republicans are going Nazi? I mean, he's a Nazi.
Yes.
And he has salience in the Republican Party in a way that we haven't seen in modern times.
I think that when you are locked, as they are, into a primary system, 200 of their 220 members of Congress worry about their primary, not about their general election. Same for us, by the way, on the Democratic side. When you are locked in these algorithmic echo chambers of social media, when things have been gerrymandered so badly that you no longer care about the median voter, what you are stuck with is this constant ratcheting effect, where in order to demonstrate your pure credibility with the MAGA vein, you have to say increasingly outrageous things. How tethered those outrageous things are to actual belief, I won't comment upon, but you're going to see this ratcheting effect take hold all the way through 2028. And if we think that we can just sit back as Democrats and let them go to the extremes and then we'll coast to victory in 28, we are wrong. We have to explain to the American public not just what we are against, but emphatically what we are for.
Well, let's do that. Because, like a lot of people in this room probably, I'm wondering why the Democrats can't get their act together. This is an analytical question from a journalist, not as a member of a party. But we've seen some glimmers, right? Virginia, New Jersey, New York City is its own special case. But why have the Democrats failed again and again to confront a movement led by someone who the majority of the country finds repulsive?
Yeah, listen, you and I can sit here for 30 minutes and we can, one, talk about how awful Trump is and we'll be in violent agreement. And we can talk about all the different ways that Democrats...
Well, I think they're good people on both sides, by the way. Yeah.
And we can talk about all the different ways that Democrats have been dysfunctional. I'm trying to be constructive because we don't have a lot of time. We got 1 year into the midterms, and we got 3 years until what the most important election is in my lifetime. I know we said that in 2016 and in 2020. It was true then. It's still true again in 28. And so my view is I want to build on what's working. I think there's 3 things that are working in the Democratic Party right now that have the potential, if we thread them together, to actually be a bolus of a majority in this country. One, we talked about it, is the constitutional patriotism. We are the party of the rule of law. Number 2, I think, actually started out not federally but locally. It was the YIMBY movement. It was people looking around and seeing that housing was expensive, and actually the problem was not that we had to make more rules and send more checks and subsidize demand, but actually we had to build some housing. And that has now started to spiral into a broader abundance movement about energy and transportation and housing. And the core of it is, and I say this to Ezra and Derek, who wrote the book with great love and respect, it's just explaining supply and demand graphs to the Democratic Party. If you want things to be cheaper, you can't subsidize demand and restrict supply. You got to actually expand supply of the thing that you care about, whether it's childcare or housing. That is working. It's worked at the YIMBY movement at the local level, and it can become a governing philosophy around affordability.
I know you want to dwell on the past, but I'm a journalist, so give me this question. Why has it been so hard to explain basic economic principles to the Democratic Party core?
Too much of the Democratic Party, I think, holds up FDR as the avatar of what government can and should be doing at any given moment, which is to say we were in a Great Depression, and what was necessary was a massive demand stimulus to kickstart the economy. And it was this epitome of government, being bold and experimental. And government should be bold, and it should do strong things. The problem was, during COVID, we did not have a demand problem. We had a supply problem. It was the exact wrong diagnosis of what was happening. What we need in this country right now, if you want housing to be cheaper, or energy to be cheaper, or childcare to be cheaper, or to make it easier to build trains, is you don't need to subsidize more things on the demand side. You have to make it easier to build stuff. It takes us 15 years to build anything in this country. Try getting an accessory dwelling unit in your backyard right now, okay? And come back in 6 years and tell me how it's going with the permitting. It's too darn hard to build stuff. And the country that builds and invents faster wins the 21st century. China is out-inventing and out-building right now.
Talk a bit about the splits in the Democratic Party. Know which side you're on. Let me use an example just from yesterday. Ben Rhodes, the former Obama national security spokesman, had a big op-ed in the Times arguing that the Democrats need to turn against Israel. That the Democrats need to actually divorce themselves from the cause of Israel and align themselves thoroughly with the Palestinian cause. We know that this issue is going to pervade many primaries. You're on the pro-Israel side of the fence. Is that an example of the party's activist base trying to reach young people, or is that an example of the party's activist base driving the party too far to the left, or some combination of the both?
Yeah, I think after October 7th, there was a faction who thought Israel could do no right and was culpable for the atrocities of October 7th. There was a faction that felt like Netanyahu could do no wrong, and criticizing him meant broaching a sacred relationship. I didn't agree with either faction. I support Israel when I think Israel's doing the right thing, and they have been successful in extinguishing the circle of fire that encircled them after October 7th. I've also criticized Netanyahu vociferously when I thought he was way outside the bounds of humanitarian conditions. What I won't ever do is just buckle to the online mob. And that is what has happened too much. You had mentioned sort of this flood the zone strategy from Steve Bannon. Democrats have a flood the zone problem as well. That zone is social media. And until we get a handle on these social media corporations, our politics is going to continue to be polluted.
Well, get a handle on social media corporations? That doesn't abolish the police from 2020. Hurt the Democrats, that hashtag. Abolish ICE now, free Palestine. These are going to obviously activate some people, but alienate a lot of other people. What does regulating social media companies have to do with those ideas? That's not fighting Nick Fuentes and the Nazis. No. That's people expressing their semi-mainstream views.
No, my point is that on social media, too many elected officials are orienting ideology to what is popular, on social media when it is divorced from the median voter's opinion. The great bell curve of American ideological opinion, this is going to surprise people, but it's true, still has 2/3 of Americans between the 40-yard lines of American politics. And the problem is the confluence of social media and our primary system and gerrymandering means that the average politician is not oriented to the 40-yard lines of American politics. It's not the incentive.
Is there a technological fix, or is there
Sure.
well, do that one, and also can you get members of your party to stop looking at Twitter so much and thinking that that's where real public opinion
Yes.
is?
So the short answer is there absolutely is an electoral fix for this. In fact, it's going to be on the ballot in Massachusetts in 2026. It's an all-party primary. It's how Boston elects its mayor, for example, which is to say the top two candidates who get through a preliminary go to the general, whether they be Democrats or Republicans or independents or one of each. And what that does is it automatically changes the mathematics for politicians. You want people to behave better in Congress, change their incentives. And the founders understood this intuitively. They were psychologists just as much as they were political scientists. They just understood that humans are going to be humans for as many hundreds of years as this country is alive. Fix the incentives, you fix the people. And changing to an all-party primary goes a long way to fixing the incentives. Same thing with gerrymandering. This will shock some of you, but New Jersey actually does a pretty good job of this in terms of local governance. New Jersey's system for drawing its district lines for Congress and the State House is actually pretty fair. It has both parties compete on maps, and it has a neutral arbiter. We should do that everywhere in this country. You do those two things, you get a lot of better results.
I've always thought Massachusetts should be more like New Jersey myself. So.
I think
Totally with you. That's going to go over big, by the way, in Newton. I'm going to love it. Stay on this subject of the Democrats orienting themselves to 2028. Talk about the role of identity politics in the Democratic Party. We can talk all day about the Republicans and their problems, but I want you to diagnose the weaknesses and articulate the needs of the Democratic Party. You talk about there's not a lot of time for the Democrats, and that's true. Talk about identity, the sort of things that came to the fore in 2020.
Yeah, we had started this conversation by talking about the idea that Americans fight for. The idea is that we're all born free and equal, that the circumstances of your birth should not determine the condition of your life, and that government under the rule of law is the best guarantor of that freedom and equality. That's a very popular idea. It's an idea that demands that you look at each individual as unto themselves with their own merit and work ethic and integrity. And just in general, the more politicians divorce themselves from that idea, whether on the left or the right, because the right has its own identity politics, whether on the left or on the right, you start to lose the median voter. It's very reliable. And that doesn't mean that you don't invest in a level playing field for everybody, and it doesn't mean that you don't turn a blind eye to history and the reality that not everybody, even though everyone's born free and equal in the eyes of God, doesn't mean they're born free and equal in terms of opportunity. But Democrats should just talk about the inherent dignity and worth of every individual and be the party of equal opportunity for all.
That sounds very different than the message that you would get from a Mamdani or members of the so-called squad. What does Mamdani's victory in New York City mean for the Democratic Party?
Listen, Zohran Mamdani has been mayor for 0 days of New York City.
And he's doing a great job.
Okay. I'm the chair of a group called Majority Democrats. It's 32 Democrats, elected officials across the country, federal, state, local. A bunch of them are mayors. Mayor of Denver, mayor of Newport News, Virginia, mayor of Cincinnati, mayor of Kansas City. These are mayors who have been mayors of their city for years. They're doing it oftentimes in purple cities and red states, and they are delivering on public safety. They are building more housing. They are cleaning up homeless encampments. Those mayors are the ones I look to for the future of the Democratic Party.
That's pretty clear. I want to ask you, as a national security expert and as a veteran, I want to ask you a little bit about what's going on this week, because it's very, very important. Your analysis of the Venezuela campaign, for starters. Do you think that Pete Hegseth may have committed a war crime?
May have. And we should care, as you said before, we should care about those details, because to those men who were huddled on those boats, they weren't details, they were their lives. We also need to see the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is that this is blood for oil 2.0. We all can remember 20 years ago a Republican president said, there's this country, it's got a terrible leader. Let me tell you what a bad leader he is. And we're going to go fix it. We're going to send some troops on the ground. It'll be quick, though. It'll be easy. Don't worry about it. And we're going to bring democracy, and we're going to secure the American public. So I need consent, and I need money, and let's go. And it was an awful idea. And it really was a huge part of the collapse in Americans' trust in our institutions. And this guy's trying to do it again. Venezuela has the biggest oil reserves in the world. Chevron has a joint operating agreement to run those oil reserves with the Venezuelan state company. This is not about drugs. I was on the fentanyl working group. The drugs are coming from China. They're not coming from Venezuela. This is about oil. It's about money.
War crimes?
The secretary should be allowed to present his side of the case. If there was a second strike, if that strike was meant to kill those personnel as opposed to disable the shipwrecked vessel, that's a war crime. Again, though, details do matter. But again, bigger picture here, there's no law of armed conflict because we're not at war with Venezuela. I know that because I'm a member of Congress and I never voted for it. Okay? This is a law enforcement action. If the Coast Guard wants to go interdict those vessels, it should. And I would hazard I'm probably the only member of Congress who actually had boots on the ground in Central America doing drug interdiction operations in the Special Forces. I did it as a Marine reconnaissance officer. I commanded a 60-man mission there. I know how to do it. You work with the Colombians, you work with the Panamanians, you do riverine tactics, you do jungle tactics. You do not park an aircraft carrier off the coast of Venezuela and throw bombs at fishing vessels.
Talk a little bit about your own experience in this, because I think we're seeing this fight right now. I mean, Hegseth and J.D. Vance in particular are arguing that the rules of engagement, the rules of war, are handcuffing American operations around the world, and that all these things need to be loosened. Since you are a veteran, combat veteran, talk about this argument and talk about how the Democrats seize the high ground, not only on, let's say, the civil liberties related issues or the JAG related issues, but on the crucial issue of, yeah, if you vote for a Democrat for president, this country will be safe.
The American Armed Forces should be no better friend and no worse enemy. And I believe in a strong and lethal military. And I don't subscribe to a fully isolationist philosophy that says that we shouldn't engage anywhere in the world, no matter what. But we also have to recognize that since 9/11, we have allowed war everywhere, all at once, always. And it has degraded the rule of law, and it has not made us more secure as a country. And our ability to use our military effectively starts with Congress taking back its war powers, which it has ceded in ever greater share, really since Vietnam, but especially since 9/11 with these authorizations for the use of military force.
Right. Go back to the future of the Democratic Party. If you were advising one of the, I don't know how many it's going to be, 10, 12, 15 people seeking the nomination, talking from the position of a let's say national security centrist, what are the minefields that you would advise them to avoid as they go forward, not just in 26, but in the candidates for 28?
Minefields politically or minefields on national security?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
the minefield politically, I think, is don't become MAGA light. Don't think that we're going to win voters over by looking at the Coca-Cola and offering a Diet Coke to dress up populism in slightly more polite language. Mainers. I hope Mainers don't do this with Graham Plattner, for example, because bigotry isn't populist. Okay, and conflating the two should not be done. What I would say is,
just so you go on the record in this, Graham Plattner, you don't feel should be the candidate because of the SS tattoo?
The SS tattoo and his comments thereafter, to me, are personally disqualifying, and I would hope Mainers would agree with that. Yeah. He described them to the Associated Press as quote, not a liability. Should be. You have a Nazi tattoo. I would think it is.
It's interesting that goes back to this point I was making earlier about the surreal nature of everything, that we're arguing about whether whether a candidate for Congress knew that the tattoo he had on his chest was an SS tattoo or not.
But this is what I'm pushing the party for is we have to offer our own vision of the good life and our own ethic of improvement for this country. And it is grounded in constitutional patriotism. It is grounded on an affordability agenda that actually works. We're not talking about 50-year mortgages. We're talking about building more housing. We're not talking about hooking up the oil majors by invading Venezuela. We're talking about next generation geothermal and permitting reform. We're trying to make government actually work, just actually deliver for the things that people care about. And I also think it needs to be grounded and tap into a true touch-grass populism, because these social media corporations are attention fracking our youth. They're corroding our civil discourse. The Republicans in Congress are just 180 degrees outside of public opinion on this issue. And if Democrats will seize this issue and will fight these corporations on the question of not just freedom of expression, but freedom of impression, to be able to control the content that is flooding your brain all the time and your children's brains all the time, I think we can get a next generation.
Talk about your work on that a little bit before we go to questions. Talk about your work on that subject.
Well, it starts with just the observation that the three most powerful gatekeepers of news, media, and information in the world today, no offense, Jeff, are Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and the Chinese Communist Party.
And Margaret Lowe.
Yeah. Chinese Communist Party owns TikTok. I think that's a problem. I think that's not a good thing. They treat our children like products, and they monetize the attention spans of Americans. They have three critical strengths, three centers of gravity, as we would say in infantry tactics. One is their liability shield. They can't be sued. You can be sued for defamation. They can't be. When Alex Jones goes out and harasses the Sandy Jones families, such that the parents of one of these children who was gunned down has to move 7 times because they're being harassed, Alex Jones gets sued, as he should be. The platforms that allowed him to spread that defamatory content, no, they were untouched. I want that general counsel and that CEO to lose sleep every night that Alex Jones is propagating that hate. Number 2, their strength is teen time on apps. Teens are the cultural tastemakers that draw other people onto the apps, and network effects is what makes these apps work. And so they need to draw in our young people to spend 6 to 8 hours a day online. It's now the case that the average American child spends less time outdoors than a federal inmate. That's the social media corporations. And then the final thing, of course, is their money. I mean, they make $250 billion a year just on digital advertising in America, just between Google and Meta alone. And so I just unleashed a package of bills that goes after all three. We're going at the jugular here.
Question from the audience. Is there a line that Trump could cross that would be a step too far for Republicans?
No.
Okay. No, seriously.
Jeff, my second day in Congress was January 6, 2021. I was walking over broken glass to go certify this election. I will tell you right now, 2/3, 3/4 of those Republicans who voted to decertify the election result, they don't think that election was stolen. These are not dumb people. These are scared people.
There's nothing he could do.
No.
Then why is there some Republican liveliness around this boat strike
issue? I was raising my eyebrows when you were saying that. Yeah, there was some huffing and puffing by the Senate chairman of the committee. Let's see what they actually do. I've been doing this for 5 years. I've been agent in dog years doing it. My BS meter for Republicans in Congress gaining a spine against Donald Trump is extremely high.
Here's another question. The judicial and legislative branches, are they still a viable option for the reinstatement of the balance of powers?
The judicial branches, you said? Or legislative?
Judicial and legislative branches.
Yeah, they are. They are. One thing I would say, and I put myself maybe as a contrarian on this issue, is there has been this sort of meme, I think, that the administration is ignoring the courts and the courts don't matter. That's not true. The court orders are being largely enforced. I'm not saying uniformly and always and forever, but actually in large measure, what judges are saying is getting effectuated. And it's really important that Democrats don't stop believing that that's the case. One, because we're going to take back power and we need people to respect judges' opinions when it's our opinions. But number 2 also is that it also breeds a sense of apathy and hopelessness, that, it doesn't matter, and you shouldn't try to fight back. And when the NIH does something ridiculous with indirect costs, you shouldn't sue the NIH in court. Well, actually, you should, because it matters, because there was an injunction and the NIH is actually following the law. So I think the judiciary is fighting. It can't fight alone. It needs Congress. And it starts with reforms to the emergency powers. I can squint and see a world where if we truly romp in the midterms, that there are some Republicans in the House who would work with us on the Article 1 Act and take back some control over emergency powers. And from that tiny spool of thread, I think you could start to pull.
Let's one more question for you. This has been on my mind, and it goes directly to 2028. I was talking to a young man recently, 24 years old, who was voted for Kamala Harris. But he explained the Democratic Party's deficit with young men this way. He said, if a young man voted for Kamala Harris for president, he voted for her despite the fact that he's male. If a young man voted for Donald Trump, he voted for him because he's male. Talk about the gender gap and how you get young men, working class, multiracial, back to understanding what you understand about the Democratic Party.
Yeah, it's true that we have a huge gender gap for Gen Z. I think an 18-year-old man is more likely to have voted for Trump than a 75-year-old man, which is, for any of us who remember the days of Obama, wow, that has changed. And it's not like men get more liberal as they get older, right? So it's not
been my experience.
Yeah, not a great trajectory for the Democratic Party. What we don't do is we don't patronize them. We don't try to, quote, meet them where they're at. I've been an 18-year-old man. You don't want to meet an 18-year-old man where they're at. Like it's not.
It smells pretty bad.
It's condescending. It's like you tell them where they're going and what they're building. You say, we need you. This country needs you. We got 5 million homes to build. We got to build 5 Hoover Dams worth of clean energy. We got to build more ships in the Chinese Navy. Get to work. Go to the trade school. Join a local union. Join the military. There's a lot of different ways to be part of a team that's building stuff, but go build.
Fair enough. I want to thank you for doing this. Thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. Turn over to Margaret.
Thank you, Congressman Auchincloss. Thank you, Jeffrey, so much. Can we please give them another round of applause? And a round of applause for Meghna Chakrabarti also. Jeffrey, I also want to thank you and the team from The Atlantic for making your first stop, WBUR in Boston. I just hope that the next 49 states have conversations as relentlessly interesting and important as that one. So thank you for that. And thank you to everybody here. Please give yourself another round of applause. Time is the most precious thing that you have, so we're really, really grateful that you spent so much of it with us. Please keep subscribing to The Atlantic. Please keep supporting WBUR. We need you, and we're really grateful that you were here tonight. Drive carefully. It's wet out there, and have a wonderful night.